Hi everyone, I'm John and welcome to the Fit Life channel. I'm a bit sick right now. I'm recovering from COVID, so if I sound a bit off or different, that's the reason why. I recently did some videos that compared the Sony ZVE-10, the Sony ZVE-1, and the Sony Xperia PRO-I's video quality and autofocusing performance in various low light scenarios while using their auto mode. You can check out both of those videos from their links in the description box below. In one of those videos, a viewer pointed out that the max ISO for the Sony ZVE-10 was set at 6400 and that it had the ability to go even higher than that. When using Intelligent Auto, the max setting for the ISO cannot be adjusted. This may have limited its low light video performance at higher ISOs because it was capped at that 6400, and perhaps that's why it didn't do too well against the Sony ZV-1 and Sony Xperia PRO-I in certain lighting situations. The advantage of using a larger sensor, such as the one found on the Sony ZVE-10, gives the ability to use higher ISOs in low light scenarios so you have a clearer picture or video. That could be one of the main reasons someone would choose the Sony ZVE-10 over the ZV-1 or Xperia PRO-I. If you want to go past ISO 6400 for the ZVE-10 and ZV-1, you would need to choose Program Auto, Aperture, or Shutter Priority Mode or Manual Mode to do so. In video mode, on the ZV-1, you can go as high as 12,800, and on the Sony ZVE-10, you can go all the way up to 32,000. For the Xperia PRO-I, it is still set at 6,400. So for this video, I'm gonna go ahead and run those comparisons again between the Sony ZV-1 and the Sony ZVE-10, but without that max ISO limit for both cameras. Will the ZV-10 improve its video quality or perhaps its clarity now that it can max out at an ISO of 32,000 in extreme low light situations? Let's see if the auto performance for both these cameras remain the same or degrade at higher ISOs. All of the camera settings are going to be exactly the same as the last two video comparisons. I'm only going to make one change, and that's to the Sony ZV-1. I'm going to set its aperture to f2.8 to match the 60mm f2.8 lens on the Sony ZVE-10. For the lighting setup in my micro studio, I'll go ahead and include a diagram like I've always done in my past comparisons. Enough of that, let's get this comparison going. Welcome back everyone. It's around 9 p.m. at night. I'm very tired, had a long day, but I need to get this comparison done because right now it's pretty dark. I tried to do this comparison during the daytime, but couldn't get my micro studio dark enough to push the ISO past 6400. I had to wait until nighttime to do this comparison. It's a bit hot in my room right now. It's about 31 to 32 degrees Celsius. You can see my glasses are fogging up. It's a bit humid, so please bear with my sweating and the fogging glasses, but this is what I have to deal with right now. So right now, all lights are on the Sony ZVE-10. Shutter speed is 1/50, f2.8 aperture, ISO's at 200, eye tracking box is staying stuck here to my left eye. Here on the Sony ZV-1, shutter speed is 1/50, f2.8 aperture. The ISO is a little bit higher, it's at 400. Eye tracking box is staying glued here on my right eye. All right, let me go ahead and turn off this floor lamp. Floor lamp is off. Sony ZVE-10, shutter speed is 1/50, f2.8 aperture. The ISO is now going between 1000 to 1250. Interesting. But the eye tracking box is still glued here to my right I. Here on the Sony ZVE-10, shutter speed is 1/50, f2.8 aperture. The ISO is now at 2500. The eye tracking box is still glued here to my right eye, so not too bad. But sometimes I see the face tracking box pop up, but most of the time, eye tracking box is glued here to my right eye. All right, yeah, it's hot here. I'm sure you can see the sweat coming off of my face here. Let me go ahead and turn off this overhead light. All right, Sony ZVE-10. Shutter speed is still at 1/50. Oh my goodness. When I sat down, the ISO was at 3000. Now it's going to 10,000, switching up to 12,800. So it's going between 10,000 and 12,800. So it doesn't know where to settle. Eye tracking box is still here on my right eye. Let me go over to the Sony ZVE-10. Here on the Sony ZVE-10, the shutter speed is 1/50. The ISO, oh my goodness, it's at 6400. Now it's going to 8000. I saw it peak at 12,800, but I think the cameras are still trying to figure out where to put their ISOs. Yeah, oh, my glasses are fogging up here. 6400, 10,000. It's all confused. I think it decided to stick with 8000. The eye tracking box here is still glued to my left eye. Sony ZVE-10. It has a higher ISO. It's staying at 10,000. Interesting. I think the BSI sensor on the Sony ZVE-10 does help it out in these types of lighting scenarios. That's what I've been saying in my past 2 videos. Right now the ISO is at 12,800 here on the Sony ZVE-10. On the Sony ZVE-10, it's still at 8,000. Eye tracking box is still there, but when you come back to the Sony ZVE-10, it's going face tracking box, eye tracking box, face tracking box. All right, let me go ahead and turn off this background light here. For the Sony ZVE-10, shutter speed is 1/50. Oh no, it dropped down to 1/30. ISO is at 20,000, 32,000, 20,000. Yep, going back and forth between 20,000, 32,000. Now I just have a face tracking box here. All right, on the Sony ZVE-10, shutter speed is 1/25. The ISO is maxed out at 12,800, so it will not go any higher than that. And it's switching over to a face tracking box. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna switch off this final light here. I'm pretty sure we're not gonna really see anything because I don't have any light inside my room. On the Sony ZVE-10, this is all lights off, obviously. Shutter speed is 1/25. The ISO is maxed out at 32,000. Makes sense, but I can kind of see myself. I can actually see my glasses. I think the light is bouncing off from the display onto my glasses, and it's illuminating myself here on the Sony ZVE-10. Here on the Sony ZVE-10, I cannot see myself. Shutter speed is 1/25. ISO is maxed out at 12,800. Yeah, so I don't know anybody who's going to be recording in complete darkness like this. When it comes to max ISO settings and be able to see anything, from what I can tell by looking at both of these displays, I can kind of make myself out in the Sony ZVE-10. Of course, I'm going to put this on my big monitor and let's see how it turns out there. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on the flash to my Sony Xperia PRO-I and put it here. Let's see what happens. All right, so I have the flash from my Sony Xperia PRO-I on. I'll put it about right here. The shutter speed is 1/50 on the Sony ZVE-10. The ISO is at 25,600. Here on the Sony ZVE-10, shutter speed is 1/25. And the ISO, of course, is stuck at 12,800. It's not going to go any higher. On the Sony ZVE-10, I'm getting the face tracking box but here on the Sony ZVE-10 I'm not getting anything, so I'm not too sure if my face is going to be in focus. All right, I'm going to turn some lights back on. All right, so let me go ahead and transfer the files from both of these cameras to my monitor, and let's get a closer look at how the video quality and autofocusing performance with both of their ISO settings set to max. The ZVE-10 started to push its ISO past 6400 during the comparison when the overhead light was off and I just had those two background or accent lights on. Here you start to see a lot of noise in the scene, losing some detail from myself and the objects around me, but it's still okay if you're going to view it on a small display such as a smartphone. I could still see individual hair strands, sweat rolling down my face, and even my beard stubble. Objects near me still had defined lines to their shape. Colors lacked saturation, but the contrast was still there. I can still make out light and dark areas distinctively. The scene will look warm because the background lights use warm bulbs. You can see the ISO is also changing throughout the scene. However, the autofocusing is still good. It stayed locked onto my face most of the time and didn't really shift to the background that much. The ZVE-10 started to push its ISO even higher to 20,000 to 32,000 its max when only the incandescent light was turned on. Here you can see the scene is very noisy. There is a lack of sharpness. Myself and the objects around me are very blurry, colors are unsaturated, and there is a very low contrast and a purplish tint to the entire scene. Every time my face moves around, the ISO will change also. The autofocusing was very unreliable at these higher ISOs and in this type of lighting. Sometimes my face will become blurry or it will focus on the background. Eye tracking was useless and it could never keep my eyes sharp or in focus. So for something that has a large sensor and lens like this, it's very disappointing at these high ISOs. Is there really a need to push the ISO this high? Look at the video quality when the ISO is low compared to this. As I always recommend, find some decent light source and keep the ISO below 3200 when you are recording videos. Similar to the ZVE-10, the ZV1 bumped up its ISO past 6400 to 8000 during the low light comparison with just the two background or accent warm lights on. Its video quality looked very similar to the ZVE-10. It did have some noise, but still decent detail. I could make out individual hair strands and even the sweat dripping down my face. Contrast was okay, but like always at ISOs this high, colors lacked saturation. Autofocus was still good and I didn't see it struggling to stay locked onto my eyes, which remained in focus throughout this comparison. The ZV1 finally maxed out its ISO at 12,800 for the low light comparison with only the incandescent light on. Once again, it looks similar to the ZVE-10. It appeared really noisy and soft with low detail. I couldn't see individual hair strands and that famous sweat rolling down my face throughout this video. Yeah, couldn't see that anymore either. But I was able to see the various objects around me without any issues. Colors lacked saturation, but the contrast was decent. If you remember, the ZVE-10 had a purplish tint for this comparison. Well, the ZV1 has a green one. The autofocusing on the ZV1 was able to track my face and keep it in focus while the ZVE-10 was unable to do so. So did the ZVE-10 need to go past 12,800 for these comparisons? No, because we can see on the ZV1, the scene is still visible with less noise and doesn't look extremely soft. So I'm going to repeat this again. If you want to record in low light, use a decent light source and keep the ISO below 3200 for both of these cameras. Noise might be okay in photography, but for videos it can be very distracting and is dominant at these extremely high ISOs. So as a final thought, it might be good that the Sony ZVE-10 can go all the way up to 32,000 for its max ISO, but I have a feeling most people will never use that ISO when it comes to video work. It was a fun comparison, but realistically, I think that's just more for marketing and bragging rights. All right, so if you have any other concerns, anything else you want me to do between these two cameras or the Sony Xperia PRO-I, please leave it in the comments. I will try my best to make a video or answer your questions in the comment section as promptly as possible. Don't forget to tap that like button, subscribe if you haven't done so. Till next time, stay safe, keep learning, and I'll see you in the next video.